Hello and welcome back to another Plex Media Server test, and today we are testing one of the lowest powered NASs we've ever used here on the channel for our test. Today we are looking at the DS120j. We are using it with DSM7 and it is a NAS that is not exactly going to blow your socks off. As you see there, this is utilizing a Marvel Armada 3720. It's a dual core 800 MHz CPU and it's 512 of memory. As highlighted in a previous video, this is indeed a 64-bit ARM CPU, not a 32-bit as I have vouched in the past. I apologize for that. And this NAS has got Plex Media Server installed and the same files we've been using for all of our other tests in the other videos. Now, this is a NAS that knocks around for about $99 or around about 110, 120 pounds. And again, the conversions never quite work out there. You've got to remember the tax. But as far as Synology NASs go, this is a NAS that not only supports DSM7, but also supports Plex Media Server, among other apps. And we are going to be running the test that we've done in the past, but unlike a lot of my other videos, I am going to chuck a lot of caveats your way. First and foremost, if you are looking at utilizing the Synology DS120j as your Plex Media Server of choice, it is worth highlighting that this is a NAS not designed to do things quickly. This is a NAS that in the past we have seen take significantly longer than any other NAS to do average tasks, and that's because of both the hardware inside and the memory. Even a quick glance at the monitor there, this system is doing precious little, and as you can see there, the system is using quite a significant amount of CPU and memory just to run typically. Indeed, if we switch over to the Plex Media Server side here, we can see that the green line is Plex Media Server and the system line is the purple one, and the system is going to be utilizing a lot more memory for typical utilization all of the time, which already significantly reduces the hardware available. Also, this CPU does not support transcoding in a hardware sense. It has no embedded graphics inside, so everything's got to be done with either software encoding and transcoding, or the system is going to need to do everything with just raw horsepower and as much as it can hold in that limited memory space. So throughout this video, I have very low expectations of how this system is going to perform in Plex Media Server. Indeed, what we're going to do is head straight in just so you can see me doing this. We are using a Plex Pass. We are going to make sure the system can take advantage of the full specifications, and again, you can play around with this to make sure you can prioritize, but we're going to use the full potential possible throughput that we can on this. We're going to go back into it. In the next video, we are going to be looking at that DS220j as well. But for now, what we're going to do is make sure we have the dashboard on screen there and keep a good eye on the CPU and the memory throughout our tests, largely ignoring the bandwidth consumption there. It's going to be less of a problem. So as usual, let's start this test with the same video we always run with. We're going to go with the matrix there. We've already scraped the metadata there in the background. We've got all that information there on the bottom left. We will be using OBS as we always do, which means that this video may have the odd encoding bump along the way. But as you can see already, I've not even clicked play and the CPU has ramped up there. And as you can see, that ramp has been caused by Plex. It's not just the system in the red, it is Plex, the green one there. And so make sure you keep an eye on the green line there and the slightly kind of turquoisey color there, because the other ones, these are the ones that we're going to see how Plex is doing. But for now, let's go ahead and play this file and see how well the system handles playing back this 1080p file. Using no transcoding, it's in its original format there. We're just going to see how much resources we use. Now, unlike a lot of my other Plex Media Server tests, of course, I will try vaguely some of the testing of things like 4K and HEVC media, but I hold little to no expectation that these are going to play. So I'm going to really focus a lot more on the 720 and 1080p Plex Media playback on this system. Natively, it's worth highlighting that this CPU can transcode 4K HEVC or H.265, but only using the native Synology Video Station app, and we've already compared that in the past. But we're leaving it there, that things have settled down, so let's skip back and forward and see if it allows us to skip through the file. Again, I'm going to leave this grey box on screen here so you can see that all the way through the media format hasn't changed. But for now, even when we're skipping forward from this relatively low-end 720p file there, we're seeing some bumps along the way there in the CPU. The memory isn't being too taxed, but the CPU is definitely taking a little bit of a kicking there. So for now, let's go ahead and commit a transcode. We're going to move this 720p file down to a 480p file there. So that was pretty immediate, has to be said. That was a pretty immediate code there. Have a look there, we can skip forward. It's managed to be able to do that pretty quickly. It's converting that file pretty darn quickly. The CPU is little jumps along the way, but it's not too bad. Another caveat I will add during this testing is that we aren't running any other kind of aggressive applications. Things like Docker, things like Video Station, Audio Station, Synology Photo, stuff like that. And if you are running those applications and services, there's probably a very good chance that you are going to see the general resource consumption outside of Plex just be too high. But for now, we can see it's gone fine there. Now we're going to move into the more middling, troublesome ones. We're going to go into 240p. Let's click that one there and see how well it converts. This Marvell CPU, although hardly the most aggressive processor on the market, is actually pretty good for a 64-bit ARM processor there. It's an ARM v8, but for now, I think 240p is just a little bit too much for it. Both the memory and the CPU there is taking a bit of a kicking. So again, this isn't even like the hardest. This is the first test. I've never seen a NAS struggle this early doors, but of course this is a very modest NAS system. And if there's one main thing I want you to take from this video throughout, although I'm not going to be like laying into this NAS savagely, but I am going to say that one big takeaway from this video, I hope a lot of you have, is that you get what you pay for. And if you are looking for a Synology NAS for Plex Media Server, there's every possibility that you should spend a little bit more. 240p, I'm just going to give up on that now because it doesn't want to play. Next. Oh, no, it did there in the end, as I say. Not the quickest, but it may get there in the end. We're seeing some serious pixelation there. Let's get a decent look at that. But, of course, the pixelation is because we've lowered the resolution quite significantly. Let's go and skip forward and see how well it does. If we do that skip forward, we've got the loading icon there. CPU is living there between 80 and 100% consistently, with Plex Media Server just propping it up the whole way. Even memory utilization for Plex has dipped into around about the 28, maybe 30% mark there. What is it saying? I can actually see it, 26% of that 512 megabytes of memory. So you can see how much the system utilized there. I wouldn't call this a success. I'm not going to be nice enough to call it that, but I will say at least it converted it in the end. Let's switch now down to a 160p file and see how well the system deals with that. I generally find that the 160p file is weirdly not as hard for the system as 240p. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but genuinely I do find that 160p will often play on some systems when 240 doesn't. Sadly, that does not look like it's going to be the case here. I think we can largely write off transcoding in every regard here, as far as the DS120j and Plex Media Server goes. Had a little sip of my coffee there. I do apologise. It's very early in the morning here. But again, I'm not really prepared to call this a success. Even if this plays, if you were watching this movie from the comfort of your sofa, this would hardly be considered acceptable. We can see there, if we zoom right in, we can see the caching there, the bill of dark orange there, and the file has managed to play at this low resolution, but it was by no means quick enough. Let's come out of this file now. We're going to give the CPU a little bit of time to spin down there. We're going to be fair to it. We're going to let it have a little cooling period there. And again, I wouldn't normally extend this courtesy to most NASes, Synology or otherwise, in my Plex media server testing, but I think with the 120j, I've already added that caveat at the beginning that this is not going to be a speedy piece of kit. Next up, of course, is Little Shop of Horrors, the original version there with a great ending. All the casting, all the metadata scraping has been done, all the extras, everything's ready to rock. But even selecting the files, we're seeing, once I flick through the libraries, CPU utilization is getting absolutely pwned, even in the vaguest sense there. So for now, let's go ahead and click play. And CPU utilization is now living in the 50% or so mark. We're playing it back. It's a 1080p file, this one. 1.9 megabits per second bitrate. Over there, we saw an initial spike when we were looking at the file. And again, largely orchestrated by Plex Media Server itself. If we have a look there. And then right now, I mean, I haven't even paused it. That is the file pausing itself and not really spitting out things as quickly as it possibly could. But as usual, let's do a skip forward. Original quality. Skipping back and forth. A number of you, I'm sure, watching this video are inquiring why don't I just use the convert automatically settings. That provides the best level. But I'm not prepared to do that if we're going to compare all these NASs on different bit rates and different resolutions. We have to maintain consistency, and we can't allow kind of flexible performance to be compared. I'm pleased to say that now the initial buffering of that file has reached an acceptable level. The CPU utilization has reached a nice comfortable amount. If we dip outside of that, we should see CPU spike a little bit, as it does there. But again, I'm prepared to call that a decent original quality playback there, quite easy. But for now, let's make our way into the transcoding. So now we're going to switch into, we're going to go for 1.9 megabits per second bit rate, convert to 720p at 4 megabits per second bit rate. Let's go ahead and click there, see how it performs. And it was a near enough instantaneous conversion there. Not too much to be done. It's kind of easy doing. We can skip back and forth. It seems absolutely fine. Going through, and of course I've had to mute these videos because of the good old YouTube bots that can always be a pain. We're now going to switch down to 480p. So 480p there, we're going to let it do its thing. We're going to see how the CPU likes those apples. Let's have a quick look. And CPU utilization has leapt up dramatically, just like it did before. A large part of me wants to ignore this caching here, because it feels like that's the caching from the previous playback. See how OBS is doing. OBS is still recording neatly there in the background. But again, not really calling this a success. And again, we are already well aware that this was not a CPU that was born to transcode. We thought maybe, at least original quality is being played back there. And just really, just to give it, you know, a spirit of fairness, I'm going to go ahead now and convert into the other ones just to say that we did. So we're going to switch now to 240p. That was largely the breaking point for the previous file, and I see no reason why things are going to change here with a denser file. The top there, we're still not exactly getting breathtaking results up there, are we? We're seeing everything getting absolutely mullered to the highest degree, and I think we can pretty much bail on this test because I don't think we're going to see anything more above than what we've already seen in the previous testing. So now we're going to move into the 4K and 1080p Jellyfish files. Now, for those that haven't followed the channel before, when we do these tests, this is the same 30-second file known as a Jellyfish test file. It's from a great little website. It is in the corner of the URL on all of the videos. Sorry, the URL is in the corner. And with each of these 30-second files, the quality increases from H.264 to HEVC, otherwise known as H.265, to HDR, otherwise known as HEVC 10-bit in some circles, and then the bit rate increases 10, 30, 100, then we move into 4K, not 1080p, and then we go into all of these varying quality levels. Now, we're not going to go through all of them, because I think this NAS is going to struggle with the majority of them, but what we're going to do is run a few of them. For those that aren't aware, if you do go into the Jellyfish files, even though they're the same 30-second file, as you can see, they increase in size. There's our size tab, as you go for each quality level, starting at just 10 megabytes. Once we get to the bottom, it's 1.4 gigabytes of media for just 30 seconds of footage. So the density of this file increases, and very few NASes have comfortably played back the last 3 or 4 files in this list. So we're not going to be too hard on this NAS. But for now, let's play the 1080p 3 megabits per second file. It's going to play it back because we've already tested some 1080p. CPU definitely saw a spike there on the right hand side of the screen, but nothing too bad, and it managed to transcode it, not transcode it and get the buffering done, because it's only 30 seconds, hence the CPU kind of puts its feet up a little bit. We're going to go for transcoding now. We're just going to go through playback. For those that aren't aware, generally H.265 or HEV files, because it utilizes an improved compression technique and because of issues of shared patents, H.265 and HEVC files generally are forced to transcode if you do not have licensing. And again, a lot of brands, and this isn't just NAS, there's a lot of multimedia devices out there that will not natively play HEVC or H.265 files. But as you see, it has just kicked us out flat, even when it's trying to encode it. So if we do the same thing with the HEVC 10-bit HDR file, it's almost certainly going to be exactly the same treatment. It feels like this is a system that is not going to be H.265 or HEVC ready, and more we're seeing this with the conversion. It's just not doing it. It's trying to convert it. We can go for that automatic conversion, but we're not really going to measure it because, as we said before, we need to have kind of comparable results to the other NASes that we featured in the past. But for now, we're not really seeing anything good. Look at the memory utilization leap up quite significantly while we're doing this. Again, bear in mind, this is 512 megabytes of memory, and these files get absolutely huge later on. But for now, even if it plays back this file, even if we saw a little bit of buffering there, there's no way buffering would outmatch general playback. So we're just going to go through the H.264 files for now, just to see how well it plays those. This is a 10 megabits per second 1080p HD file, and as we can see, playing it back. Lovely stuff. We're not going to do transcoding. We're just going to go through every one of the H.264 files. This is a 30 megabits per second playback file, and again 1080p H.265. Buffering has certainly slowed down. Buffering is only just staying ahead, probably by about 40, maybe 50% ahead. And of course, as it continues, that would be absolutely fine on a longer file. CPU utilization getting quite dramatic spikes there. Now we're going to move on to the 100 megabits per second file. And if we have a look there, let's see how the caching deals with this. But we're already starting to see now, this is kind of the breaking point for H.264. It took a while just to engage the file. We're up to 4 seconds. Even if it plays, buffering in the background is only barely staying ahead of the playback there. I think maybe it would remain ahead for the rest of the playback, but hardly dramatically. I think this would be a case of watching a film. You wouldn't be able to fast forward even slightly or rewind without the system having an absolute paddy. But we've given up there. We can have a look there. It's tried to play it, and it has played it, but only barely. So now we move on to the 4K files. This is a 4K H.265 file, 120 megabits per second. Let's zoom back out, and let's see how the system plays with 4K. Again, unsurprisingly, transcoding is so fantastically off the table on this system. I wouldn't dream of recommending the DS120j to anyone that wants to watch 4K, really. But at 1080p, I think it's doing a damn fine job, and it has even managed to play that 4K file, although arguably it's going to be interesting to see how far ahead this buffering gets, or whether the system's just going to kick us out or not. Because right now, we've reached, 4 seconds of buffering, of caching there, of the file in original quality. But we're not seeing much else, and the CPU is starting to sort of ramp down a bit there, which often means that it's given up. There we go, and it has kicked us out. So that 120 megabits per second, no luck. And then, of course, we're going to try the 200, even though the 120 didn't work. So we're going to go for that one there and have a little look how this wants to play the game. Gotta love those seagulls, everyone. But for now, I don't hold out a huge amount of hope. If it struggled and went fantastically for the previous playback, I see no reason why this is going to play the ball at 200 megabits per second 4K media. Again, we might see a little bit of buffering. We might get lucky. I don't think we will. After this, I'm going to end this video shortly. I'm going to do a couple of HEVC files, highly efficient video codec, but I will say almost certainly is not going to play them. And right there, the CPU has just plain kicked us out. So we've already tried, oh no, we didn't want to do that, did we? We want to come out of there. We've already tried the 10-bit file there, the HEVC there. So what we're going to do is just try a couple of them. We're going to go for 10-bit 10-bit HEVC at 10 megabits per second. Leave that to do its thing. It almost certainly won't play, but it might do. You never know. Look at that utilization there on the right-hand side of the screen. But let's wrap things up. This is not a system that I would happily recommend for those that take their multimedia seriously. If you're a home user and you're just looking to stream the movies you own to a few devices around your home network, I think this will do the job. If you're not looking at watching 4K, I think you can definitely get hold of this. Bear in mind, it's kicked us out again, that if you try to play anything even slightly aggressive, the CPU and memory utilization will just go off the chart. So there will be no transcoding here. You'll only be able to play back files natively. And ultimately, if you are looking for a way to watch the media from a Synology NAS on your smart TV, Amazon iOS devices, tablets, iPads and more, I would strongly recommend going for Synology's Video Station application over Plex on this particular NAS. It's a great little app, and it will allow you to use the hardware resources inside a great deal more effectively, and have full access to them. Synology's Video Station application is completely for free. It's got all the services that you need. It does all the metadata scraping. It's a decent little program, and if you are looking at an affordable, $100 NAS like the DS120j, it definitely outperforms that of Plex Media Server. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, click like. Stay tuned for my DS220j video, where we will talk about Plex a little bit more. And otherwise, do use the free advice section in NAS Compares in the link in the description. It is genuinely free. It's manned by me and Eddie the web guy. We just want to offer our services and help. It might take us an extra day or two to answer your emails. We're only 2 people and we have lives, but we will answer every email with free, unbiased advice. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.